So, Brian, this is it. This is the week that we finally reveal the giant twist that you have been recording from 1982 this entire time, and I'm in present day.
Not only that, I'm your biological father.
Not only that, but I am also a divorced widow.
Not only that, I have cancer and have 2 minutes to live.
Not only that, my long lost brother just arrived, and he's another race. I don't know which one yet.
He's the Indy 500.
That's not a race. Oh,
It's
no,
a
it
race.
is a race. I'm sorry. Now I get it. Well, that's it. We did it. Hey everyone, welcome back to TV Guys, the show where we discuss shows that make you cry more than it does to fill up your gas tank. I'm Matt.
I'm Brian, and I'm not sure if that's true.
That I think it's a comparable. It's
Yeah.
equal amount of tears. So this last month, we just finally said goodbye to the Pearsons from This Is Us. We have been watching them for 6 seasons, is it? I believe it's 6 seasons.
Yep.
I'm just spouting facts that I have not checked at all. Yeah, there's 132 episodes. No, we've been watching them for 6 seasons, and they finally came to an end last month. And so we're like, we have to talk about this show because we've mentioned it before. We haven't had a whole episode about This Is Us, so we are going to talk about This Is Us. We are going to spoil everything. If you're still not caught up yet, then get caught up and come back to watch this or listen to us because we are spoiling the very last episode, the things in the last season. It's all fair game.
And talking about spoiling, I didn't tell Matt I was going to do this, but just like in This Is Us fashion, we're going to take a trip back in time, back to one of our very first episodes ever of the podcast. Listen to this. We had an episode about Beth. We had an episode about Toby. I'm surprised we haven't gotten Miguel's childhood by this point.
Yeah, well, I'm glad that they finally did it. Like, Miguel's this character for all these years, like, hey, can I get a backstory? You'll get a backstory when we say so. Okay.
And like they explore everybody else. Like, yeah, I mean, it makes sense to explore like Beth and Toby, but then like they started exploring Madison. It's like, really? Before Miguel?
Here's a Deja episode. Okay, Deja is great, but I mean, we've had Miguel since the beginning. They had, like, in the first season, I think they had a William episode too before he died, which is fine. But again, Miguel's been here the entire time. He's been a season regular.
And Nikki has like a whole season.
Jeez. Yeah. So we finally got it. We finally figured out what's going on with Miguel just in time for him to die.
And then for them to like basically forget he existed right after that.
Like, he's dead, so we don't need him in any other parts of the episodes.
Even though Jack's been dead this whole time, and he's been a very big part of the show.
I know. Okay, we're going to talk about, like, again, we're going to talk about the final stuff too, but we'll kind of break it down, talk about the different families here. And I think Jack and Rebecca are a great place to start, because my biggest complaint about the final season, and maybe the season before that, is that in pivoting to focus on Rebecca, which I have no problem with. I actually liked, like, I think it was the end of 4th season or something like that, when like they had this big moment of like, man, it's been mom's been holding us together for this whole time, and like the kids realized the strength of their mom, which is great. But in pivoting to that, it ends up they didn't have story arcs for Jack. And so, like, the last season and a half or 2 seasons has been like, Jack's just there. And sometimes he's not even there. And as a big fan of Milo Ventimiglia, I'm like, oh, I want more of his stuff. He's great, even though they wrapped up plenty. So
I've been saying this for a while. It's hard when you have a character who is only in the past. Like, he can't be part of the present storylines at all. They weasel into like, oh, someone has a vision, or Rebecca has Alzheimer's and she thinks that Kevin is Jack, but he's gone. So there's only limited amount of big stories you can have with Jack, and they kind of ran out a little bit. I think the first big thing where once we find out how Jack died and we saw that episode, it's like that was the big thing they were holding on to for those first couple seasons. And then they were able to squeeze out some more when they introduced Uncle Nicky, because that's a whole section of Jack's life that we hadn't known about.
Yep.
But it's hard going forward just to have another big reveal about Jack, because at that point we've been following these characters for 4, 5, 6 years, and
Yeah,
all of a sudden if you were to say, oh, this major thing happened with Jack, well, that would be kind of hard because there's no way that wouldn't have come up in the past 4 years.
yeah, and I completely get it, and I agree too. But like you mentioned, when they find out about what happened with him with the fire, they did tease that. Like all of
Mm-hmm.
season one was like a mystery of what's going on with where did Jack go, and then you find out he died. How did he die? And then it wasn't until the Super Bowl episode in season two, episode 14,
Mm-hmm.
when they reveal how he died and the fire that killed him and all their fallout with that. But in that exact same episode, there's something new that they introduced as well, and that's what they focus on for the rest of the time, and that was the flash forward that they did. And
Mm-hmm.
so in the same episode where they reveal how Jack died, they show their hand, so to speak, and I think that they did a good enough job of like holding back the future stuff and just
Mm-hmm.
kind of like hinting at it all along the way. I'm not criticizing that at all, but it pivoted the focus of the show. And you're right, we needed Uncle Nicky to give more time for Jack and the story arc for him in Vietnam. And I think it was after my timeline might be off. It might have been after they revealed that how he died that they also did his alcoholism story arc as well. And
That
so
was
they
shortly
had
before, because
shortly
they
before.
have been
Okay.
going through that. I've actually been rewatching This Is Us. I'm close to the end of season 2, and there's the big episode where Kevin is dealing with alcoholism, and they talk about how Jack's alcoholism and all of that.
That's right, because he has his big emotional thing on the lawn of that one night stands house, and yeah,
Yeah.
and that episode too was the very first of like they did this every single season. They would have like 3 episodes in a row where it was the big 3 episodes, and so it
Mm-hmm.
all focused around like this one time. I really love them doing that, but it all focused around this one time. They'd be like, well, this is Kevin's part of it, this is Kate's part of it, and this is Randall's part of it. And I loved how like
Mm-hmm.
they knew that they did that well in that second season, and they're like, we have to do this every single season.
Yeah. And even I love that even within the show in universe, they knew that the big three were like the main characters, because when Kevin went to rehab, they're like, oh, how about just the immediate family? So then Beth, Toby, and Miguel go and like day drink all day at a bar together, and they're
Yeah.
like, to the outsiders.
Yeah. And I do like, I think it was in that same episode that Miguel was like, oh, that's a sore spot for me of like, trying to fill Jack's shoes. And that's, we get that part of Miguel because he's very interesting. Like Miguel, if we're talking about Jack and Rebecca, we also should probably talk about Miguel, because
Oh yeah.
Jack is like, sure, we saw his alcoholism, but that was really it in terms of big character flaws. There was so much about him that was praised, and that was early on too. Like, how do we live up to that? How does Kevin, as the son, live up to the legacy of his father? How does Miguel, as the new husband, live up to the legacy of the previous husband? And I really enjoyed any time with that, and I thought they did that super well.
Yeah, they kind of have Jack being this like shining light both in and out of universe as like this perfect guy. Yes, he had the alcoholism, but other than that, like he was able to get it through like pretty quickly both times. And I've never experienced alcoholism myself, so I don't know how accurately they portrayed that. But it is interesting, and it is that thing where you looking back. Obviously, you don't want to like talk ill of someone who's dead. Like that's kind of a jerk move, but it really seemed, and I think Toby and Beth and Miguel even talked about that in that scene. Like, yeah, you can't ever bring up Jack. That's like a no-fly zone, so they called it the Pearson no-fly zone.
Yeah, and that I feel like that's very realistic too. I feel like that's one of the most realistic things that this show does, is that maybe there is a little bit of an unreliable narrator with this, where maybe Jack wasn't actually as good as we see him in the flashbacks. Maybe that's been altered a little bit, and that's just our way of remembering him. Because you're right, that's kind of what we do when someone's passed on, unless like we really didn't like him, there's a big antagonistic relationship there. We remember the negative stuff, but a lot of times we forget the negative stuff, especially if it's in our formative years. And as long as the mom or dad was there and they were trying, then we remember those times, and we remember them being there. And it's a nice little relief for us to be like, sure, we're gonna scar our kids. As a parent, we're gonna scar our kids accidentally. There's stuff they're gonna get emotional baggage, but as long as we're there and as long as they're trying, they're going to remember that stuff fondly. They're gonna remember us fondly.
Yeah,
it's a nice encouragement.
Definitely, and especially when it had the contrast when you see how terrible Jack's dad was.
Yeah.
Which I'm a little bone to pick on this one. So it was about a season and a half. I forget at some point ago, they did a flashback to Jack's dad with Jack when he's a little kid, and they're at the hospital when Nikki's being born. And in that scene, Jack's dad is like a very caring dad. He's like, oh, he's talking to his dad, saying, "Yeah, we're gonna name the kid Nicky if it's a boy." And I thought, okay, cool. Like they're gonna show us how does this guy come from this guy who seems like a perfectly good dad to the crap dad that we've seen later on, but we never saw that. We never saw how did Stanley's his name go from that to what we know of Stanley.
Yeah. Well, I don't quite find that funny. Yeah, you're absolutely right though with Stanley is that I think the implication is like that's what alcoholism does is it takes someone who maybe they are a good person, but when they become addicted to something, it throws that good character out the window and it reveals the worst parts of themselves. And that's probably what they're going for, but I think you're right. It could have maybe been drilled home a little bit more and we could have seen that along the way. So when we're talking about here, pivoting a little bit, when we're talking about Rebecca and Jack and their relationship, we also need to, now that we're talking about the end of the show, the big finale is the big finale actually takes place after Rebecca's death, but a lot of it focuses on Rebecca's death. And the penultimate episode, the one right before the finale, is all about her passing away and like the process of her actually dying. Yeah. So how did you feel like with Rebecca? Because this is what the show's been aiming for. They've been heading towards this target and it all happens in that penultimate episode. How did you feel like that was resolved? How good of an episode or bad of an episode did you think it was?
I think it was done really well. I think the whole Rebecca Alzheimer's thing was done very well. And it seemed like a jarring thing, but you also have to realize that they did some time jumps in the final season ahead of times because it started out with just little things. She's forgetting things here and there. Which, Matt, I don't know if you've had any family members with Alzheimer's, but my grandma, my dad's mom, had Alzheimer's, and there's a lot of very similar. At the very beginning, it was just like she would do things that were a little bit awkward and weird, and then by the end, it was a very different story.
Yeah, it's such a sad disease because one of the things that I find so tragic is loss of memory for anyone, because it's like memories are us. They're who we are. And without the memories, then we don't have those experiences anymore. And so to lose your memories, it's like you've lost a huge portion of your life. And so and for them to live with that every single day and for them to just not even have anything to ground them anymore. That's why I love music, is because music has been proven scientifically to help with that and to help ground people who are having issues. So if you have anyone in your family who's having some mental stuff, you find what their favorite songs are, their favorite music, especially music that they loved growing up or when they were younger, and that can be such a good source of comfort for them.
So we've seen in Stranger Things that music can be very beneficial. That's all I'll tease for that.
Surprise, man! I gotta say, she's gonna love that song. Like that, that's gonna be her favorite song for the rest of her life.
She's gonna be like 80 and still having that Walkman on. We should save this. We will definitely do a Stranger Things 4 podcast, and we will talk all about that.
Yes, 100%. So I like how they ended it, and I thought that the whole episode was a great way to bring in all of these actors from previous years, especially that doctor that we saw in the pilot episode, and then to also see the young versions. I thought that was very tastefully done of like, oh, Kevin's playing with a younger version of Kevin and also a younger version of Kevin, and all that sort of stuff. So she sees her kids all along the way, instead of just like the one that we see right now living. She sees the past versions and those memories are there.
Which and I thought, you realize also at that point, she's kind of like in her mind stuck in like a version of the younger Rebecca, which is why I think that she sees everybody who she knew as a teen. Like she sees Beth and Sophie as teens as well, because she knew them when they were younger.
Yes. Yep, 100%. And I like that they also did the thing with Kate too. Because it allowed everyone to have a good moment. I liked Toby's moment. Toby it's a nice, funny one, but it's heartfelt, even though there's sarcasm in it. And I like that the two brothers had a good moment with her, and then there was also the very special relationship, because I mean you have a different relationship as a son as you do to mother daughter, and
Yeah.
so for Kate to have her own moment too, and kind of like at the last minute that she was holding on for Kate to be there, I thought that was a nice touch.
Well, and even like when Kate said it's Bug, which we've seen the whole series, that's been Rebecca's nickname for Kate. I think it's the first time that Kate ever announced herself as Bug.
I think you're right. I don't recall another time.
Mm-hmm. With that whole Rebecca being stuck in her 20s, it makes it a little bit jarring that she sees older William, but that's just for us, I think.
Yeah. I I don't know. Maybe what was it that she knew William when he was late? I mean, she met him that one time, but she actually knew him when he was at the end of his life. So
True, yeah. She met him twice, but that would have been the younger William.
yes. Yep. Yep. So that was it. That's how they ended that. Also, we talked a little bit about Miguel. Do you have anything more to say about Miguel apart from, hey, here's my backstory. Now I'm going to go ahead and go now. Bye, everyone.
I don't know. I mean, it's hard. It's got to be a hard situation to be into. But I think that he knew that. I think even growing, he always knew that Jack was like the love of her life, even if she was the love of his life. And so, like, I don't see that as Miguel's actual ghost in her mind on the train. I think it's just her remembering him. And I think if it is, as long as sad as it might be, if it's her remembering him from when she was in her 20s, that's not her husband. That's Jack's friend who she's fond of, but she's not going to like have a big moment. Like, you're not going to have a big moment with your spouse's friend when you're at the end of your life if you don't know that, hey, I was married to that person for 30 years.
Yeah, and I've been a little sarcastic about it, but I'm gonna say it more pointedly that I wish that we would have gotten more of Miguel's storyline, especially when they realized like we should do a lot more of showing the how did they go from I'm Jack's friend to we're married, and so we got to see a little bit of that story over the last 2 seasons. But I think we could have gotten more, and I really would have enjoyed to see more instead of like the even we got too close too fast. I've got to move away, and then years later that we get brought back through social media or whatever. Okay, whatever. But I liked that younger version of them after he had died. Like, even when they're trying to date someone else and they were denying to themselves, because that's exactly what you would do. Like, you knew Jack, you knew that this wouldn't be an easy thing, and it would feel weird for so long. And so, of course, he didn't feel like Rebecca was an option. He felt like she was a friend, and it took other people, like everyone else, realizing the relationship before they did in order for them to do anything about it. And then even then, some extra time after that.
I think the extra time was good because, I mean, you see, especially Kevin had a really hard time dealing with Miguel marrying his mom. I think if it happened that soon after Jack's death, I think all three of them would have a lot more lingering resentment for Miguel, even if obviously, like Miguel said at one point, like there was no being interested in Rebecca while she was with Jack, because they were Jack and Rebecca, not Jack and Rebecca.
Yeah. So I would have liked a little bit more, but I think what we got was good. I just Miguel was a character that should have been flushed out a little earlier and a little bit more often.
Agreed. So. All right, which of the three should we jump into?
Let's talk about. We can talk about Randall and Beth, because I feel like there's another story arc that there wasn't as much with them this season. Like, their big stuff is in season 4 when they thought that, are they going to make it? Are they going to get together? And then they resolved that. And then a little bit of like the political side of his relationship after that in season 5 and moving into senator and maybe a presidential run. And then her dance stuff in season 5. And then season 6, they just were another one on the back burner because it was all about Kate and Toby. And it was all about Kevin, and it was all about Rebecca.
Yeah, which I think the whole show as a 6-season whole was a lot. I think they focused way more on Randall. Like, for some people, sometimes it seemed like it was the Randall show. And I think they just kind of like, okay, we've done so much with Randall. He can just kind of be there for a little bit.
Yeah. And that's no problem, because season 5 did have a lot of that. Is, when it kicks off with the George Floyd death and all that sort of stuff, and then like his look into what it means to be a black man in America, and it's and I'm sorry, not even just that, a black man in a white family too. And so I think that that's good that they were able to go into that route. I don't know if they were planning on that before the stuff that happened with George Floyd and the pandemic stuff, because I think all of that changed the way that they did season 5.
Well, I don't think they would have gone back to it because they touched on that early on with William, because William was only in the first season when he was alive. And doing that, like, what would my life have been like if I would have been raised by a black family versus a white family? And there's a scene where William doesn't think that Randall knows what it's like to be a black man and to be profiled, and he's like, "No, I get it. Like, we're in the store right now. I know that security guard is gone farther away from his mark than he should be because he's watching us." Like, he's like, "I get it."
Yeah, so having tackled such a tough subject for him and a lot of growth with that, and then again, like I said, the season before that with Randall and Beth and their relationship, and then finally, like, nope, they're good. They will never have this close of a breakup scenario that they had in this season. At that point, they're like, yeah, they're in the background. So I'm glad, because Randall is a great character, but he also gets annoying, and you can understand how he gets annoying with like his having to control everything. And so for the fact that he was able to let that go in season 6 and to not have to be that allowed us to just enjoy him as a character instead of being like, Randall, you're making bad choices and you know it.
A lot of times when I'm the most annoyed with Randall is also the same reasons when I would be most annoyed with not this Jack, but Jack from Lost, which is like, you know what? He's got a good head on his shoulders. He's trying to do the right thing, but at the same time he has this sense of authority in every sense of his life, which obviously when you're with your kids, sure, if you're in a position where you have authority at work, great, but like his mom and his siblings are all fully grown adults, and he doesn't have the authority to say, I'm going to do this, or you have to do this because I say so. It's like, no, you're not in charge of your siblings, you're not in charge of your mother.
Yeah. And maybe you know best, but there's no guarantee there. And so for you to act 100% like, yes, this is the best route without taking fully their opinion and their feelings into account, yeah, that's not a good thing.
Which was the big crux of that giant, was that at the end of season 4 into 5, the Randall Kevin blow up?
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they resolved that well in season 5, and that's why I think they changed things, because for them to end on such a big note of like the Kevin and Randall split and the fight that they had, and for them then to come back and kind of pivot away from that at first, I think that's why I was like, oh, they went through some rewrites of what they intended to do here.
Yeah, I know you could say that Randall's kids, especially Tess and Annie, well, especially even Annie, had like hardly any storylines. I don't remember a specific Annie storyline in the whole 6 seasons, but there's a lot they did with Deja.
Yeah.
And that was a big thing where I think both Randall and Beth thought, yeah, we're great parents, we'll jump into it, it'll be super easy. And then when it wasn't, like, people probably know, I know my son is adopted, and my ex-wife and I, we did foster care too. It is more difficult than you realize, and you're not going to be prepared for it. And I think they did that very well. And like, it wouldn't have felt genuine if she just came in like, oh yeah, I'm here, I'm part of the family, great. Like,
yeah, and it was great in the Deja episode that we got, where we got to see her before she came to the Pearsons back in season 4. And I think Deja was a great addition for that family to give them a new level of drama and a new level of, another great, because she's a good character too. Mm-hmm. And so it was a great addition. It gave us a lot to look at and focus on, and just the way that Randall handled it, like, just like any other parent, there are things that you do well, and there are things that you do that you thought you screwed up but somehow ended up coming out smelling like roses, and you're like, oh, we made a moment out of this. And then there's things that you thought you would do well and you'd crash and bomb with it or make the wrong choice. And so it's like, it was very multi-leveled, and it was great to see, like, ooh, there's not really an easy right answer with some of these situations that they have in raising Deja.
Yeah. And I love also, on the lighter side, towards the end, Beth, they gave her moments where she kind of just poked fun at like the ridiculousness of the Randall storyline. Like, at one point, Randall wanted to move Rebecca into his house, and she's like, why are you always trying to move people into my house? I mean, there was William and Deja, and at one point Kevin lived with them for a while, and it's like, And then not only that, there was another moment, in the final episode where she's like, well, let's see, you've lost your final of all your parents, and they did another one of their worst case scenarios. He's like, you just snap, you just go driving around from tree to tree, honoring all your parents.
I also liked her comments in the Thanksgiving episode because again they were outside the realm of the drama for that episode, but it's like it's a Pearson Thanksgiving, so something's gonna happen, and then just like when it does, she's like every time with his family.
Yeah. It's true. Beth really became the audience surrogate, where she can say the things that everybody else doesn't want to say.
Yeah, she's a good. It's amazing how many good characters there are on this show. Because like when I went into the show in the first season, I liked most of them, but like Kate, I was like, eh. And there are again times that Kate annoys me, but in this final season, Kate was a great character. Minus some of the choices. Maybe now is a good time. We can pivot into Kate and Toby.
Sure.
Because it's like there's a lot that you like about Kate, but there are some choices that, and I'm glad they went this route, that it wasn't like, oh, this is all Toby's problem. And because it's things that are problem with Toby, that's why they broke up. It's like, no, Kate also had her chance to decide, do I want to fight for Toby or do I want to still follow my dreams? And instead of like even trying to figure out, is there a way to do both? And so she dug into her dreams and he dug into his dreams. And that's where that split happened. Like, yeah, there's the tension beforehand, but when they finally decided I'm 100% digging into my stuff, then there was no coming back from that.
Yeah. The Kate and Toby was a heartbreaking breakup because, going back to episode 1, Randall and Beth were established before we saw flashbacks of how they got together, but we really followed Kate and Toby from their first meeting and saw them fall in love, saw them go through, and they were like couple goals for a lot of people. And then for them to suddenly not make it. I mean, and that's realistic. I mean, I haven't really talked about this podcast, but last year I went through a divorce myself. And it's like, yeah, like different times in your marriage, you think it's going to work out and how hopefully it does. But the way they handled it was, I think, done very well and very accurately, I think.
Yeah. It's so hard to watch because again, there's so many times where it's like there are some things that it's unreconcilable. You've got things that you're like, this is a schism that is never going to get figured out, and there are other times where it's like with Kate and Toby, where it's like you guys could have still had it. You guys still could have had the things you wanted. And you might not have had the exact same way that you wanted it, but you could have had what you wanted and stayed together. And that's where it's the most heartbreaking, because I feel like that can be a story for so many people of, you change into another person. And it's kind of that same episode where Kate was sitting with Toby, and the Toby that she started dating.
Yeah.
And well, they change. You change as a person, and that's where it gets hard in relationships, is because sometimes you think that the person you marry is never going to change, and they're always going to be that person you fell in love with. And then when they change, it's like, how do I adopt this new you into my life? And when they can't, that's when the divorce happens, or the schism, or whatever. And it's painful to watch and see couples go through that. And I'm sure it's, Brian, you could say it's painful to go through it yourself.
It is, but I also like the fact how they show. I mean, yeah, definitely it's painful and stressful and everything. And then you have to have conversations with everybody. I remember last summer I was like, I am just done with having conversations about this. But I like that they show that they can actually come together and be on good terms, because Max and I, we're on good terms right now. Like there's no tension right now. We communicate about my son. Everything's good. And I'm even still in contact with a bunch of her family. And I don't go to the level that This Is Us does, where like I'm not going to the family events like Toby is.
Yeah.
Like, but whenever her family passes away, I'll probably go to the funeral. I'm not going to be in the family section, but I'll be there. And I like that the show is that like it's not like you're going to be terrible forever. It's not going to be the same, but you can still work well together. And I definitely would have appreciated that story more now. I'm glad they didn't do that a season earlier, because that would have been hard if I was watching that while going through it. But now being on the other side, I'm like, I'm recognizing like, wow, like this show did this very well. It makes me think like how well, like I mentioned, I've never been through alcoholism. I'm wondering if other people who've been through these different things, how they identify with those parts of the show.
Yeah. Yeah, I gotta say, one of my favorite representations of like that new normal and that we're good with each other sort of family dynamic is actually in Ant-Man 2. Because in Ant-Man 1, Scott's ex and her or her husband,
Yeah.
they're very antagonistic towards him because he just got out of jail and all this sort of stuff. And then like they realize how he has changed and how well he's doing. And so in Ant-Man 2, they're like big fans of his. They're all like best friends with him, and they're like, for the good of Hope. No, is his daughter Hope? Whatever. For the good of the daughter that we have. No, it is Hope. For the good
No,
of Hope.
Hope is Kate from Lost.
That's right. I can't remember what her name is. Sorry, for the good of Cassie. That's her name.
Yes,
took me way too long, but I got there. So for the good of Cassie, it's like we are going to make this work. We are going to be friends, and we're going to believe the best in each other. And so I thought it was a great use of that family dynamic.
Yeah. Also, I called it the first time we saw Toby in the flash forward. We saw him laying in the bed alone, and that Randall called him, and he's like, "I don't know if I should come." And I definitely think in that moment they were trying to tease like, "Oh, is Kate dead in the future?" And I was like, "No, I feel like it's if they were going to go that route, they wouldn't play it that obviously."
Yeah. Yeah, I think there was another part with that too, where I think that happened at the same time as Toby's depression arc, and that there was a thought about like, oh, is he still in depression? That those many years later, is he still struggling with that and going through that? So,
also a side note that I think there's that same flashback scene where we see that Nikki was sitting by Rebecca's bedside, and they showed Nikki's wedding ring. I didn't think that Nikki and Rebecca would have gotten together because at that point we didn't see Miguel in the future, which we all correctly predicted that Miguel would be dead.
Yeah.
But my thought was, what if in her Alzheimer's she thinks that Nikki is Jack, and he's kind of just playing along because she's at the last moments of her life? That's what I thought. We didn't get that route, but that would have made sense to me.
We didn't get that route, but we got similar things with like Kevin kind of standing in a little bit as, okay, I'll play along with this part. That so yeah, Nikki was a storyline too in the final season that like him and his wife, like that happened in a flash. that was a quick one.
You know, all of the late stage love interests, I'm talking about Nikki's wife, Toby's girlfriend, Madison's fiance and her husband, and even Philip, who married Kate. I don't think all four of them, they kind of just were shoved in at the very last minute. And you know, throughout the series, go ahead.
And Sophie, actually. Like, sure, she had a lot early on, for sure. But over the last 2 seasons, they had made it like, I don't know if they were always intending to come back to Sophie, because they made a big deal about her early on, and they made a big deal about like, you know, when he first was kind of going between those two people in the play in the first season, and then it's like, then I just realized once you're done, you realize the one person that you want to be with, and then boom, he's in front of Sophie again, and like multiple times it's we're destined, this is the one I want to be with, all these sorts of themes, and then they dropped it for a couple seasons. Especially when he's dealing with Madison and all that. And so for them to bring it back so quick, sure, they did the groundwork, but we still needed we needed some foreplay to get back to where we were at. We can't just jump in full barrel.
Because I mean, thinking about everyone else who joined, like the Pearson family, thinking William, Deja, Nikki, even Madison. Even though like they didn't get married, they all got like long story arcs. We got to know them and get to really feel them get ingrained in the family. Where it's like, Kate's married, Nikki's married, Toby's married. It's like everybody's getting married.
Yeah, and it made sense. Like, I'm glad that they didn't like have him end up together with. Is it Zoe? Is that?
Yeah, that's Beth's cousin.
No, I'm meaning the from House, Jennifer Moore.
Cassidy.
Cassidy, thank you. Yeah, I'm glad that they didn't end up having him together with Cassidy, because that's a relationship that makes sense, but I feel like that's a good enough sort of relationship.
Yeah.
And that it's like, well, we're only together because we're just both here and we're both willing, instead of because I actually care that deeply about you. And they care as friends, which is great. And so I'm glad that they never really made that be more than just a fling.
Yeah. Should we use that as a segue to jump into Kevin?
I feel like we've accidentally been on Kevin for a little while, so yes.
Yeah. Kevin, I think, had one of the biggest emotional story arcs from the beginning to the end, because you're watching those early seasons and like he's trying, but man, early seasons Kevin is such a douchebag.
Yeah. And he still is lost even when he gets better manners, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But he still is lost for every single season. He like losing his dad just screwed him up so whatever. So it screwed him up so much that he never knew who he was until like that final season. And so for him, like both in all areas, we see it presenting itself romantically for him and as a family man. And like, he's so desperate to be like his dad that he's like, okay, I'll marry Madison because we've got these kids coming up. And when he finally has the kids, like he has this sense of like, yes, this is who I'm supposed to be. So now I've got this foundation, but what can I add to it? And so like realizing he's okay to actually go back to being the Manny again. And except for this time, the older version of it.
Yeah.
And that being in his life. And so like, then he takes on that cabin project, and that's great. And then for them again, to throw that last little wrench at the end of like, this just isn't working. Mom's too far gone. We need to do something else. And like, I can understand why he'd be like, this was the plan all along. This is what I hung my hat on after all these years of searching. So you're right. He had a huge, huge arc.
Yeah. And what was I going to say?
I covered a lot of stuff when I did that without leaving room for you to jump in. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. And I think a lot of it is, especially Kevin, when Jack died, was fully in like complete selfish douche teen territory, which a lot of teens go through. But he never he got to have that moment of like reconciling with his dad. And I think the last thing he said was to his dad was, it's like in anger, some sassy teen comment. And that held with him a lot. And a lot of the, especially in the flashbacks, like Kevin in the flashbacks, both as a kid and as a teenager, was more insufferable than any of the other kids.
Yes, absolutely.
Because he had this whole thing, like, yes, there might have been times when Kate or Randall were favored in the moment, but without realizing it, I feel like he just resented any time either of them had any attention, especially Randall. Because it's like, dude, chill. Like, yes, your parents love you, but he is also their son. They can spend time with him and love him. And it just seemed like young Kevin thought, okay, if Randall's getting attention means they don't love me. I mean, that's an oversimplification. And I think he knew that I'm not the only kid, but he was just so starved for attention and clearly insecure from a younger age. And then of course, growing up, then he's famous and he's got this whole crazy life. And it's just, you can see his craving for attention kind of subsiding into him becoming an actual three-dimensional person over time.
Yeah. I think it's also a lot of like the what's special about me in that like family of three, or the three kids. Just like, Kate as the daughter, a daughter has a very different relationship than it does with a son, and she's the only daughter, so she's the only one who has to deal with that side of that relationship. Whereas he has to share the son relationship with Randall, and whatever it is, like, you can put a bunch of different things that there's a lot that's special about Randall. He listens really, really well to the parents. He's very respectful. He's Black. He's adopted. So he's unique and special in those ways. So there's a lot of different things that are unique about Randall versus Kevin. And so Kevin has always been trying to prove himself, and he doesn't even know what he's trying to prove, who he's trying to prove it to. He's just like, he's got 90 different chips on his shoulders.
Mhm.
And so we see them steadily drop off throughout the seasons. And there are a lot more of these, like, I'm rooting for you, Kevin, moments, especially after season 2, so to speak.
Yeah.
Where you're like, okay, I'm in your corner and I really want to see you succeed. I think like the last like big like, oh, this was terrible Kevin moment was actually in season 2 when he gets a DUI with his niece in the back.
Yeah.
And so then after that, like he does start to clean himself up, and sure, he still makes mistakes, but you always are still rooting for him to
and we
do
should
the
say
right thing.
we should say he didn't know that Tess was in the back of the seat of the car, but
Yeah.
he did very much know that he was getting behind the wheel drunk.
Yes. Yep. Yeah. So he's like the Jesse from Breaking Bad, where it's like you just feel bad a lot of times with the choices he makes that has brought the pain on himself. But at least like he does better, and he's a more full version of himself in the final, like the last half of the show versus the first half, but he still has the stuff he has to shake off. And so there's a lot of good arcs for him. I feel like Kevin every single season had a big arc, whereas like we said, Randall didn't have as big a one in this final season.
No.
Yeah.
Because there's some seasons where it's like, okay, we're going to give Randall 5 major storylines right now.
Yeah. I think Kate had every single season, she had a bigger story arc too. But yeah.
Mm-hmm. So we have this out of all like the extra, like the B-list families storylines, Beth, Toby, Miguel, Madison, Nikki. Which of those characters' kind of backstories do you think was done the best? Which one do you think was your favorite?
I at first I want to say Toby, but that's just because I like Toby as much as I do. I don't know if his arcs were ever as good, especially because it was like every single arc kind of pulled him further away. After like season 2, after he had his heart attack and after he lost his weight, it's like every single season you're just kind of waiting for that shoe to drop with Toby, of the depression he has to go through, of the not knowing who he is outside without a job and without work and struggling through that, of his like CrossFit family and all that. So you're kind of watching him slowly dissolve out of the marriage, which is a little painful. So I think that best actual arc, I feel like, was Nikki. Nikki had a really good arc from where we first meet him, developing, and like he becomes such a lovable character, even though he's a curmudgeon still. He's still grumpy, but he's that like that type of, oh, it's cute how he's grumpy sort of way, instead of like, okay, stay away from this guy because he's gonna hurt you if he gets too upset.
Well, and that day where they finally meet him in his trailer and he's like drinking himself to death and he tells the story of what happened in Vietnam. Yeah. That's some of the best acting. I don't know if he got any like awards, but he should have, I think, for that scene.
Nothing I know of.
And but also we talked earlier about Jack having flaws. I think it's a big flaw to lie to your kids and your wife to say that their uncle and brother-in-law is dead when he knew the whole time that he was alive, and he let Nikki. Obviously what Jack thought happened was terrible, but I think it's so against Jack to go decades without ever trying to mend that.
True. I think that is more, I think that's one of those problems you mentioned of like having a character who's dead, is that is outside of his character. So you have to make these concessions of why is Nikki unknown and why was he gone for all this time, and be like, okay, well, it's because Jack didn't say this, and like, well, that doesn't fit with Jack's character. I don't buy it.
Yeah. I almost would have preferred if Jack also didn't know that Nikki was alive, and then Kevin finds out and all that, and it had been Nikki riddled with guilt, never reached back out to Jack.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Because even this season we had the flashback to Jack when his mom died, and him dealing with that, and there was never even a mention that she had another son.
Yeah. Oh, thank you for bringing that up, because that was my big critique. Like, I was like, I know that they won't do that, but I think that would be such a good part of that second to last episode where she's on the train, that she would get to meet the son that died in childbirth.
Oh, yeah.
We knew that early on.
I had that thought as well.
I was like, I really wanted to see that, and I just knew that they wouldn't do that, but I really was hoping that we could see that because that could have been a really good moment, especially for any mom who has ever, or any parent who has ever lost a kid from a miscarriage or stillbirth, or like even delivered and then the baby died shortly after.
And you know, in my mind, just knowing how like sentimental the Pearsons are, I think in Rebecca's obituary it probably says preceded in death by her husbands Jack and Miguel, her parents, and I think they would have named him. They would have said her son Kyle.
Yeah. Look at you. You remember the dead son's name.
Well, I'm also rewatching the show, and it was
Oh,
the
that
whole
would do
thing.
it.
It was going to be. I mean, did they realize they were gonna? It was going to be the KKK.
Well, I don't think that that's the forefront of it.
No, but I mean, if you have 3 kids, maybe don't name them all K names because that joke is right there.
Well, I'm glad that you're here to make it, Brian. Appreciate that.
But anyways, my answer to that question earlier about the character who had some of the best stories, I think, was Beth. We had 2 Beth backstory episodes, and I think it was important because it happened so late in the game. And Beth was another one of those characters. She's there from the very beginning, and a lot of times she almost seems sidelined outside of like the Randall and Beth storylines. Like she's been in this family for 20 years. Like she should be, I think, focused on a little bit more. So it was really great to see that storyline and see like, yeah, you know what, the big 3 are not the only people who had to deal with losing their dad at a young age because Beth also had to deal with the same thing, even though they never talk about it. And I think the casting of her mom with Felicia Rashad was like some great casting.
Yeah. And I really liked Felicia Rashad too, because she was harsh and she was critical, but it, it fit the character and it never felt malicious. Like you understand why Beth has the issues that she has with her, and you can understand why it would be hard to grow up with her as a mom. But again, you never felt like the mom was just like that. She was there to tear her daughter down.
Yeah.
She just came from that sort of lifestyle, and that she had these high expectations for Beth, and that Beth did reach them. Like Beth is a great human being, and so for her to produce that human being, like that's a testament to the mother. But still, like it's hard to have that. And so I think that was very fitting because there's a lot of people who have parents like that.
Yeah. It's also very impressive in that flashback scene where Rebecca and Beth's mom meet. Because, I mean, Mandy Moore and Felicia Rashad are nowhere near the same age in real life. There's like 40-year age difference, if not more. And they're playing women who are essentially around the same age.
Yeah.
So they had to age Felicia Rashad down, age Mandy Moore up, and kind of have them meet in the middle. But they did it very well.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. Yeah, Beth is a great character. I enjoyed her arcs and I enjoyed her stories. Even as someone who's not like dance is a big part of her, and so I don't care about any dance stories really ever. And so for me to care about her is a testament. And yeah, it's less about the dance and more about the character. But
I think in general, I like when someone has even if it's not my thing, has something that is like their thing that they like love and get into. Like I can definitely get behind that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's my thing, but like for the past 6 months, I've gotten really big into like getting into the gym and trying to, you know, get in better shape. And it's got to the point where like if I miss going to the gym too many days in a row, like it just starts to mess with my mind. And I start to like almost get like depressed. And it's like I need to go to the gym and work out. And like that's never been part of me ever until about 6 months ago.
Nice. Way to go. Yeah. I did also like in this season in Beth's episode where like she's training those ballerinas and the one falls in front of everyone and she walks on stage. I loved Randall's response where he's like, lock this in your memory, kids, because this is your mom. And like that's so important for parents to do that to their kids. Like this is your parent. Look at how amazing your parent is. Shows how much I love them and shows how much you should respect them. I think that was a great example Randall set. One of my favorite parts of that episode.
So then random I think let's end with like the finale, the past couple episodes, our thoughts on those.
Sure.
But before that, I have to give a shout out. I think one of the best casting is the casting for adult Deja in the future. Because the first time we see Deja in the future, I didn't realize it was a different actress. I didn't
Yeah.
realize it was supposed to be a reveal that, oh, this character is Deja. Because as soon as I saw her, I'm like, oh, it's Deja.
I think it's probably my favorite is probably College Randall. I think and College Beth, actually. Both of them are really good at nailing the mannerisms of their adult counterparts.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I think it's a little bit more of a stretch for me to see Kid Randall go into adult Randall. The Kid Randall did a great job, but just the way he's more like energetic and hopeful, whereas adult and teen Randall have that more like I'm always serious vibe.
Yeah. Yeah, like they can have fun. They have funny lines, they can have silliness, but it's very controlled and very put together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. So final episode. This was kind of strange for me the way that they did it because I understand that it's like we're not going to end it on Rebecca's death. We're going to end it on the big three and the follow up to her death. But they couldn't do what they did like all along, where it's like, well, let's do flash forward for that final part. And so because of that, we had already gotten so much information of like what's going to be happening for them in the future, and especially the stuff with Randall, the politician things, because they keep hitting like, oh, you're going to run for president, you're going to run for president, you're going to run for president, and they keep like drilling that down throughout the final season. So I actually ended up, as I was watching this episode, I was like, you know what, I feel like what they're trying to do, they did better in the New Girl finale and the 2-minute scene where they're playing True American with their future kids and they do that flash forward.
I see that, yeah.
I liked that. That one was so full of cathartic emotion for me, whereas this was like, okay, this is how they're ending. That's fine. I didn't cry at all in the finale. I didn't have a big emotional response, and that was a little disappointing.
Yeah. And I think, first of all, I think it's brilliant foresight because they filmed the scenes with the flashback scenes like 3 seasons earlier because those kids were going to be growing. You know, it's the Walt problem.
Oh yeah.
And I even saw an interview where they talked about they called it the Walt issue, and so that's and they planned ahead. That's why, you know, on the train when they first saw it, I'm like, why didn't they have all the Kevins and all the Randalls? Because they didn't have that middle stage Kevin and Randall. They had a teen and then the little kid and the adult. Is because we wouldn't recognize. I saw pictures of what those kids look like now, and they wouldn't have fit in because they don't look the same. That's why like we didn't see that version of those kids at all this past season until the finale when they filmed that earlier. Anyways,
sure.
That I kind of like, even though some people thought, oh, why are we getting just another random Jack, Rebecca, and the kids flashback that has to do with nothing? I kind of liked that because I think it does show that like sometimes the most important moments in your life that you look back on aren't going to be the big, you know, the weddings and the funerals and the adoptions, and those are all important moments. But I think a lot of times it's just little moments here and there, little days into that can be way more important than you realize, and you can log on to those memories. Like for instance, it'll be 20 years ago this summer. My family went on a vacation with my aunt and my cousins to Wisconsin Dells. And that trip is like one of the most fun vacations of my life. And it's like one of those memories that's locked in my brain. Nice. And that kind of would be my version of like their lazy Saturday. And it just kind of realizing, yeah, we kind of wanted big moments, but I kind of liked that almost better than the whole, I'm going to name my son William, which seemed kind of forced.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I have those with the kids too, of like just the silly things. Like one night before bed, as they're putting the kids to bed, I was in this weird mood, and so Sayla's got like this. It's one of those like horse things that you can ride, where it's like the horse head is at the end, and the rest of it is a stick.
Yep.
And you just ride. So I grabbed the stick and I stuck the horse head around the corner of her bedroom door, like it was like a puppet, and then I started talking with a French accent, and I was doing like horse jokes with it, like, hello, I am here, hello little girl, and then I was doing like puns like, I had a brother who was a pony, I could never understand a word he said because he was always a little horse. Oh. And so I was like, and that joke, that's like Angie's favorite joke. She'll all the time be like, you should tell the horse joke. But it's like, I would have to tell it with a French accent. And for her to say that in front of like adults, I'm like, it's not going to make sense for me to suddenly have a French accent to them and telling this joke. It was like you had to be there sort of thing.
I feel like that's one of those like a couple of moments. That's something that you and Angie share, but that's not necessarily a funny joke.
Well, the content of the joke is hilarious, but the moment it made it much better than the joke is, I think.
Yeah, exactly. It's more of a funny story than an actual funny joke, I think.
Yes. Look at that. See, there you go. I appreciate that.
Mhm.
Yeah, it was a fun moment, and it's one I'm like, we're gonna remember this rest of the lives. I think the kids are too, but I know Angie and I will remember that just because she thought it was so hilarious.
Yeah. And then also not only the finale, but going back to, I think that train episode was done very well. And yeah, it was a lot of fan service. We brought William back, we brought Dr. K back. We saw the different versions of the kids interacting, which we just did once before with like all the Kates in like a dream sequence.
Oh yeah.
But I don't care. I thought it was good. And of course, it's not going to be groundbreaking. We know that she's going to Jack at the end of the train. That's like, that wasn't the episode for surprises. That was the episode for like almost like a love letter to the fans of the show.
Yeah, and it's sad to think about too, the writing of it for that final episode of like life is made up of all these moments, and yet Rebecca dies having this brain degenerative disease that makes you forget all of those moments. That's a sad thing, and so yeah, that's why dementia and Alzheimer's is so depressing to me, because it is, life is made up of the moments. So
yeah, and even then, I talked about how my grandma had Alzheimer's. And so I actually have two separate memories of the last time I saw her. The first, I have the actual memory of the last time I saw her when she was in the nursing home and she was like not even responsive and like just not herself, but technically alive. Mm-hmm. But I prefer to think of, leave it to this episode where I reveal way more about my personal life than I ever have with this podcast.
There we go.
And so I prefer to think of the last time I saw her in her house when she knew who I was. And even if she was a little bit off, she was still grandma. Which was me and my dad went over there. It's another one of those random memories where for some reason they were swapping the mattresses in 2 bedrooms with each other. And so my dad and I went over, I was 14, and we just swapped the mattresses and then we left. It's like, hey, how's it going? We're going to do this for you and then leave. And that's the last time I saw her in her house. And that to me is a more palatable memory than her in the nursing home.
And to this day, every time you swap mattresses, memory just floods back, which you do a lot. All right. Well, let's jump into trivia, because this has been a good episode, been a full episode, but we've reached that time. It's the end of the train. And so last week's trivia, do you remember what it was, Brian?
Yes, and we don't even have to tell you that. We have an audio clip from last week when Tammy, we let her do something we've never let any guest do before. So here's Tammy talking about the trivia from last week. So the very last moment of the revival of A Year in the Life, the last words spoken, have some significance, especially to Amy Sherman Palladino, the creator of the show, and her plans for the series. And question is, why is that?
So that was her original ending of the original series. And was it the last 2 seasons or the last 1 season that they weren't writers of the show? I think it's
just the last 1 season.
And because of, I think, money or contract discrepancies or something.
Yeah, it was basic contract bull crap.
Right, which sucked because I was like, it's like their show. So that sucks. So that's how she originally wanted to end it. So that's how she ended the reboot, which is cool, but also like, now you're never going to give us another one? Like, I want to see like all the fan theory of like Rory is Jess is Rory's Luke and Logan is Rory's Christopher, you know?
And
that's
Dean is her Max.
Yes, that's true. See, now I need another reboot. So Rory can redeem herself.
Yeah, see, it all came down to the 4 words. She always said throughout the whole run, it's the final 4 words. They're the magical final 4 words, which ended up being, if you listen this long, you know, Mom, I'm pregnant. Which is, I think, Matt, you texted me earlier today, that was dumb.
Yeah.
I agree. I think
it's dumb if there's never another reboot. But yes, I agree.
And there you have it.
So we really did have a flashback in this episode.
Yeah.
Look at that. And you guys thought we were full of it at the beginning of the episode, but we're not. We're only partially full of it. So in your face.
So this week's trivia, we talked a lot about how we see different versions of most of the characters. We see, kid versions of the adults and adult versions of the kids. There was one series regular on This Is Us who had never had any alternate versions of them. We didn't see them at any different stages of their life. Only one, this is the only actor that ever played that character. So what is the only, and it's a series regular, the only series regular who never saw a different actor portraying them in any way?
I got it. I think I got it at least.
All right.
All right. Well, let us know. Again, we said this last week. We really love it and appreciate it when you guys give us feedback, or when you like and follow us on Facebook or on Twitter, or email us at tvguyspodcast@gmail.com. Let us know what your thoughts are. Give us your feedback. We want to hear from you. We've got some great guests coming up over this summer that we're going to have on our show. Next week is Brian's former roommate, who I'm good friends with him too. And so I actually got him to be on the episode, and then Brian's like, "Oh, that's a roommate I had." I'm like, "Okay, well, there we go. We know the same people." So,
yeah, I mean, he was my roommate like a decade ago, but yeah, Matt was like, "Do you know this guy?" I'm like, "Well, I lived with him. Does that count?"
I really hope that I knew him, or else I would have been really awkward. But until next time, I'm Matt.
I'm Brian.
And we're reminding you to stay tuned and keep watching.